Hello and welcome back to They Don't Teach This in Law School. I'm your host, Charlie Mann of law firm Alchemy. And today I have someone on the show who I watched from a distance for a few years as I started seeing her name pop up time and time again, sharing her thoughts on the growth of her own family law firm, the leadership, the acceleration of her practice, which I think when I was looking at the website, there's 10 attorneys and it appears that they're searching for more. So it's still on a growth trajectory, despite the fact that she's able to travel across the country, has a new home down in Louisiana. We'll probably get into little bits here and there about how that is all accomplished. But I'm so excited to have on the show the founder of Elise Buie Family Law. Elise Buie, great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
Me too. So let's get it started. What is the one thing they don't teach you in law school?
Leadership. They fail to mention that ever.
Which is fascinating because it seems like that's a huge component of the idea of being a lawyer. So tell me more.
Well, they just don't mention it. And I think of leadership as really, the linchpin of successful lawyering, because not only are you leading clients, you are leading teams. Even if you're an associate in a big law firm, you're leading, paralegals, legal assistants, billing clerks. There's people everywhere in your realm, in your life as an attorney, where leadership comes into it. And truly, when I tell you, the word leadership did not cross my path in law school ever. And it was pretty stunning to me, I think, to realize both early on, as a law clerk, I clerked for a federal judge. Talk about a time I had to lead, and I'm leading attorneys that have 20, 30 years experience. They're way more experienced than I am. They are, these big, huge, bigger than life people in their careers. Yet I'm supposed to be that person between them and a federal judge. And, I'm supposed to help them navigate the process and make sure we're getting them into settlement conferences properly and leading the whole process. And it's just not mentioned.
So reflecting back on that particular time you just mentioned, because I think that's fascinating. It's such a thrown into the fire, thrown into the deep end moment. When you reflect on that, what are some of the big lessons that you take away from it?
You better learn to lead quickly. And, understand that role as being an exceedingly pivotal role in your journey as an attorney. And I found learning leadership to be just highly important. Both in, reading literally everything I could get my hands on. Truly everything I could get my hands on through the years, going to leadership trainings. And I have to say, I'm sure I have no scientific proof of this, but anecdotally, leading a family and, raising people into young adulthood has been highly beneficial in, teaching and practicing leadership. I was actually saying to an attorney the other day who has an only child, I was like, gosh, that's so unfortunate that, all these things you're learning, you can't go practice again on somebody else. I felt like I got multiple opportunities to practice what I was learning and innovating. And it's funny because I do look at it so much like law firm ownership. You have to try something, you have to measure it using your data, and then you have to tweak it, and make those improvements. And I felt like that as a parent the whole time. My poor children were getting, my first was definitely not getting the best me, no doubt. And, by the time number 4 came along, I felt like, oh, I'm getting this pretty good now. I've been tweaking and innovating.
So I love that you mentioned the idea of like practice reps, because I think whenever I converse with law firm owners or lawyers about leadership, the discussion often revolves around how do you get in those practice reps in a skill set that isn't like marketing where you can go and post something every day and get some type of feedback loop on it, or operations. Every case that's going through, you can see, if you have 10 or 100 live cases, you're seeing how that operational system works. But on the leadership front, it seems like a place where we don't get a lot of practice reps. You mentioned family, parenting as a way to get practice reps. In your own firm, is there a way that you help your team develop as leaders through practice reps and through knowledge?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, definitely through knowledge. Like we do a lot to teach our team about leadership, but also through feedback. I mean, we
Mm.
are a massive um, proponents of feedback. I mean, direct, compassionate feedback. We talk about it a lot. And we have a very non hierarchical firm. I mean, we consider ourselves to be a very flat firm. I mean, our
Mm.
org chart is called a circle world rather than like a typical org chart. So I don't live on the top of anything. Instead, I really live in the middle of a spoke. And so
Hmm.
we very much teach, how direct, compassionate feedback has to flow all directions, including to me as regularly as possible, so that I can be improving, innovating, tweaking, finding out and learning how my blind spots are impacting others, so that I can be delegating around myself and pulling myself out of areas where, I'm not the best person to be in it, or I've got some blind spot that, everyone else is like, yeah, duh, Elise, like get out of the way. Do you know? And so, I mean, modeling that and teaching it and having a certain level of openness around accepting mistakes, and having a
Hmm.
psychologically safe environment where owning your mistakes is not only expected, but it's actually celebrated, because when we make mistakes, and I mean, obviously, I am the queen of mistakes. Like, I mean, my team could probably list off 1,000 from last week alone. Um, but being able to own those and say like, oh, okay, I kind of goofed here. What can I learn? How can I do this better? Or even better yet, who on my team is better to handle this? And maybe it's not
Mm.
me. And so I think there's, I mean, not only training, there's modeling it, and then there's just the whole idea of really calling it out. I mean, calling out good leadership when you see it, celebrating it. And I mean, we are very proactive about that. But then also, again, providing that direct feedback when you see poor leadership. Like when I have somebody on my team who's in a leadership role who's maybe coming into a situation, with their hair on fire. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm going to be the first person to talk to them about you have to learn to bring your lowest heart rate into every room when you're a leader. Like this is not the hair on fire role. And, really helping people to understand how do you bring the lowest heart rate into every room, which not only applies to leaders in my office, it applies to everyone because every time they're working with a client, how can they bring the lowest heart rate to every interaction with their client so they're not escalating a client's already stressed out self, but instead they are bringing a sense of calm, a sense of confidence, and a sense of creative problem solving from a real place of just peace, rather than hysteria.
Yeah, and obviously within the family law practice area, which is one that people assume is filled with high levels of conflict, tension. I mean, I've heard the stories of firms that are just sending letters for the sake of sending nasty
Right.
letters to, arouse negative emotions,
Right.
etc. You're going in a totally different direction. And I know on your website, one of the videos that you have, you talk about you want this process to be transformative, not tragic. So I'm curious, in a world where family law, seeming from the outside, seems to be built on conflict, how do you bring that de-escalation process or that calm process into a practice area where there is another side to it that maybe
Oh,
doesn't always want to participate in that?
yeah, and that's a great question, and it's an everyday problem. But I mean, you can only control yourself. And I mean, we go back to the leadership point of this. I mean, as a leader, you learn you can only control yourself. I mean, you've
Hmm.
got zero ability to control another person, nor should you even try. Like, that's, you're completely outside of your lane to be trying to control how another person acts, reacts, whatever. But if you are acting in a way and you, in representing your client, are acting in a way that is calm, emotionally intelligent, respectful, professional, no matter what the other side does, you are elevating the whole process. And I mean, one of the things that means so much to me personally, I look at our role as family law attorneys. I mean, we are modeling conflict resolution. And
Mm,
these people often are at the beginning of their process. Some of them are about to embark on 18 years of conflict, depending on,
that's right.
what they're dealing with. So I want my clients and I want the opposing party, because often they will get copies of my communication. Like my client
Right.
might send it, or it might get attached to a declaration in court. I want everyone who reads communication that comes from me or my office to see emotionally intelligent, calm, professional de escalation on all things. So that, I mean, people don't send snarky emails out of our office. Like, I mean, if I ever were to be told like somebody did that, we would be having a conversation about, emotional intelligence and how are you modeling for your client positive conflict resolution, because so many of our clients, they don't have an example of how to handle conflict. But when they go through a family law case, and sometimes they can last a year, when they are
Yeah.
seeing constant good examples of how do you write a return email to a nasty gram, how do you respond to somebody who has completely upped the ante, and how do you constantly bring it back down, bring it to the issue at hand, take away those personal attacks, and learn, to not take offense to somebody else's mental health problems, and learn to understand that you control you, and that is it.
The phrase from earlier, it seems to kind of echo back here, the idea of direct, compassionate feedback, because that sounds like it's as much an external principle as it is an internal principle. I'm curious on the internal side in particular. What does that look like when it's executed?
Well, in my mind, it's this idea of, is what you're saying true? Is it helpful? And is it kind?
Hmm.
So like when you're giving somebody direct, compassionate feedback, I mean, you're asking yourself some of those questions, like, and you're ensuring that what you're bringing to the feedback is, true, helpful, and kind, because that kind of feedback is going to be heard by the other person. And then kind of the like in addition to that, we have this whole idea around how do you make decisions, because kind
Uh-huh.
of like you mentioned in the intro, I mean, one of the things that works in our firm is that I am not in the nitty gritty of everything. And I very much run this office with a very robust leadership team and a lot of empowered employees all around. I mean, my goal is to raise up the entire firm to be leaders. I mean, that is
Mm.
the goal of, in my mind, of being a leader. You're trying to maximize the people around you to be their best selves and just do their best. And as part of that is empowering people to make decisions from a place, we call it ICE. I mean, it is my silly kind of, old school way of looking at it. But I have always made decisions, I mean, literally since I was like in college, from a place of integrity, compassion, and excellence. And it's like if I can make decisions through that lens, and if my team can make decisions through that lens, I don't care what they decide. There is nothing that'll go that wrong. Like if we have those
Right.
guiding principles, we're pretty golden. I mean, and clearly mistakes can be made, but they can be fixed. Like they're so fixable. But if
Yeah.
somebody comes to me and they say, oh, yeah, Elise, I was compassionate and excellent, but I lacked integrity, we're going to have a problem then. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Like that, not one of those things can be missing from the matrix. It requires all three all the time. And I find to empower people in my office to look at decision making through that lens has been really, I mean, kind of life altering for all of us, because nobody's sitting around waiting for Elise to do anything. They know that, they got their way of looking at it and they can go.
With I love a good acronym. By the way, I love a good acronym, and I know that sometimes people can say, "Oh, something like integrity, compassion, excellence sounds trite," but I agree with you that you have to at least You have to start from somewhere. If you don't have some way to start defining it, you'll never actually reach a
Right.
definition. And I'm actually curious about that. When you have words that can sometimes be interpreted in different ways by different team members, how much of this is making sure that people abide by the definition, or we'll call it the framework that Elise has for ICE, versus as long as you, attorney or team member, are operating within what you truly see as integrity, compassion, excellence, that qualifies. So is it more Elise framework or interpretive?
I would say it is a combination. I mean, I think that I have provided trainings to my team about what I would consider to be those things. Like, integrity, I think is an easiest one as far as that goes. I mean,
Yeah.
as an attorney, as a paralegal, like there's no room for a lack of integrity anywhere in our practice. Like, do you know what I mean? That is
Yeah.
a pretty black and white thing. And I mean, we have to be careful with our words. Words matter. Like, we don't get to say things that are general, and even if what our specific instance is was different, like, I mean, all that matters. So I feel like that one is pretty easy. Compassion, I mean, we talk a lot about unreasonable hospitality and how do we
Love that
bring.
book.
Oh, me too. It's truly one of my favorites. But also just bringing a sense of care to everything we do.
Hmm.
And again, I think that, I mean, we talk about it, we model it in our firm. I mean, there is a very high sense of personal caring in our office. I mean, as far as that culture goes. And my team very much understands how I would react to a particular situation. Like, it's really not a mystery to anybody that if I'm talking to a client who's like, let's say they're very upset, maybe we haven't communicated with them well, my
Mm-hmm.
team knows very well that I'm going to hear that person, and that if in fact we didn't communicate with them well, I'm going to own that. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to try to figure out what system did we have in place that failed, and I'm going to fix it and try to make it better. And so I think that while it's interpretive on their part, I mean, I think it's really obvious when somebody is putting compassion as, a real equal partner in integrity and excellence, because I do
Mm-hmm.
think compassion is a very important part of what we do. And then excellence, I mean, is probably the most interpretive area, like,
Right.
is somebody doing their best? And I mean, clearly, I have had situations where attorneys have made mistakes. I mean, sometimes big mistakes. And, but I mean, that we have to go in and ask ourselves, like, what happened? What system failed? Like, what do we not have in place? Like, did a supervising attorney not dig in enough? Whatever it is, because it is very unlikely that it's just one person sitting around going, I'm going to try to do a bad job now. That just is very rare. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That.
so I find mistakes are often, I mean, again, leadership. I mean, I've got to look in the mirror and realize where I went wrong when there's some mistake in my office. I mean, it is rare that I get to sit and look out a window and point to somebody else. It is much more likely that I'm looking in a mirror going, okay, Elise, which system did you not have? Where was a lack of accountability in the system? And so often I'm the one dealing with the client, owning the problem. You know what I mean? Really
Yeah.
trying to dig in and find out from the client, as much as I can. Really becoming super curious about what went wrong, so that we can innovate and get better. I mean, like,
Yeah.
that's kind of the whole goal of, at least in my mind, of mistakes, is like, let's learn from them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna make them, might as well take something away from them. Because,
Exactly.
by the way, you're gonna like I so feel you, Elise, on the. I've made more mistakes this week than like
Right.
one of my team members could hope to make in the next 6 months. Right? It's just constantly making those mistakes and
Constant.
learning from them,
Yeah.
in order to make new, better informed mistakes. So now
Yep.
you're doing all of this building of the team, the growth of the firm, while also having freedom of location and increasing time freedom. Right now you're in Newfoundland as we record this. You have a new home in Louisiana. How did you start making that transition to I want to use the term jet setting. I know it's a little
Yeah.
flouncy of a term, and that's not an accurate portrayal of what you're doing. My experience in seeing from a distance what your travels are, you're a little bit more anchored. Like you do anchor down in places for some
We
time.
do.
Yeah. But being able to lead a team from a distance and still grow the practice, how did you get to that place?
Well, I mean, one, when I started the firm, we started virtually. So in
Mm,
2015, when we started, I mean, we have always had a small office in downtown Seattle that we could go to. But I mean, the main crux of the firm from the moment I started it was how do women, and at the time, I had 4 children at home, looking to me for all the things. And so the whole idea was how do women practice law and be an excellent mom and an excellent lawyer. And
mm,
so I created a firm from the get-go that had what I would call like a choose your own adventure model, where everyone chooses their own billable hours, they choose their own salary. Like, there is no thing that comes from Elise that says, oh, ye shall work this many hours, because I have no idea what everybody's life looks like. And so they have to tell me, what does their life look like? So how do they get a work life integration such that
mm,
they can be a great mom, a great whatever, and a great attorney? So with starting with that, I mean, we have been, virtual. So I think we've been at it longer than a lot of people, because a lot of people more started this with COVID, whereas we had five
right.
years under our belt when COVID started. And the other thing is, I mean, really embracing technology, but also realizing that, I mean, whether I'm face to face with my team or I'm on Zoom or I'm just in Slack communicating with people, I can develop rapport and I can do what I need to do to, be the leader of the office. I mean, it makes no difference to them whether I'm sitting in Newfoundland, whether I'm at my house in the Seattle area, whether I'm at my house in New Orleans now, or whether we're visiting our 6 kids all around the world. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, I can do what I need to do. And then we do bring together our team to, in-person events where people will come to our house in the
Mm.
Seattle area. They will come to our house in New Orleans now too. And we go to other people. So like a lot of times when I'm traveling, I will meet with my team members who are around the country and do
Mm.
things with them in their locations. And so I think we have a strong culture of caring first and, challenging directly, the whole kind of idea of radical candor, and how do you create good rapport. And so again, it all starts with caring personally and really knowing your team and understanding what makes them tick and, what is important to them. And I mean, as important as my family is to me, I tend to have team members who are similarly aligned, where their
Right.
families are highly important to them. I mean, just yesterday, it was literally one of the most touching things. I think our supervising attorney started some little thing in Slack, and she made some comment like how she had gotten up early and done all this gardening because she's on East Coast time. So she was ahead of the West Coasters. And she was like, what's the reason you love working at this firm? So many people commented, and so many of their comments were
Wow.
the flexibility we have, the fact that people were like, the fact that I can go pick up my kid at school, I can go volunteer in my kid's class, and Elise doesn't care that I'm working at midnight if that's when I want to work, or I'm working on a
Mm.
Saturday afternoon while my child is off with my husband. Like, we have just unfettered flexibility, and that, I think, is something that so many people on our team value. And and I clearly value it. I mean, like anyone who
Right.
knows me in real life knows, like I am a freedom fighter. Like I like my freedom. I want to go where I want to go, see who I want to see, do what I want to do, and work when I want to work.
Okay, so there are going to be some people who hear you talk about all of this, and I have to at some point get into the phrase pick your own salary, because that is no listener would forgive me for letting pick your own salary fly by without digging deeper on that. But I'm curious for people who are thinking, okay, I've had kind of a fixed office environment. Maybe I want to introduce some level of flexibility. How should they prepare themselves mindset wise for a team that may take that flexibility and run with it? And how do you accommodate as a leader in that space?
Sure. Well, I mean, for us, that has been a combination of my vision, which is very strong towards freedom and flexibility, to data. We run all kinds of data in our office. Like everyone in the office has KPIs. We measure things. Like I make exceedingly strategic decisions based on data, not based on my belly. And and then leadership, having like really sound leadership. So things like, building in accountability into the flexibility, because
Right.
like we talk about it all the time, like our unfettered flexibility only works with high personal accountability. Like you cannot be an unfettered flexible worker and have be a low personal accountable person. But
Right.
I have to be really honest with you, this is not, I mean, it is rare for this to be a problem. Like I find people who come to us have a very, they know how valuable the unfettered flexibility is, and they are
Right.
usually highly responsible, accountable types. And they're like, oh my gosh, like just the thought that I could not have that commute, but instead I could go exercise for an hour and a half a day. Like that is game changing for them, and for a lot of parents in particular. I mean, and I know this. I mean, when you have young children, I mean, it is a juggle to get it
Mm-hmm.
all in. And if we cannot spend that time, sitting in a car, driving somewhere that we don't necessarily want to go, like, it can be really helpful. And so I think because of the data we operate on, and the fact that everyone in the office knows we run the data, we look at it, we talk about it, we have KPIs around it, we bonus, based on things. But
Mm-hmm.
we're even funny about bonusing, because I don't want to create this culture of you grind more, I pay more.
Okay.
I want people to choose. If they really do want to grind more, I would prefer if they come to us and say, I want to change and increase my billable hours, and you increase my salary commiserately, because
Uh-huh.
I don't want, we very much talk about life work integration, and we want people to be, earning in a way that is comfortable for them, but where it all happens within the hours they want to work. Like we are not trying to get people to work more. I mean, if anything, like in our office, if people they request overtime, that tells our leaders like, oh, we might have a problem here. We might need to hire,
Interesting.
because we might have somebody, but then that person who's requesting overtime might very much want to earn more. Like maybe she's thinking, I'm saving up for a vacation or whatever. So we're going to have a very frank conversation about what is she doing? What does she want to do? Is there a reasonable ROI on an overtime, salary, like an hour and a half kind of thing? What is that looking like? Like if somebody is asking for overtime to do admin work, but they're a biller, that would probably be a struggle, because you'd be paying substantially more and not having billable hours. But if somebody is a billable employee and they're wanting to do overtime, and
Mm-hmm.
we have to look at all of that. But we are super attuned to that. Like, there's no, like, I mean, we talk about capacity. We look at it literally almost daily. I mean, we have a capacity channel where people give us a score of 1 to 5. Where are they in terms of their capacity? Do they need help? Are
Interesting.
they comfortable? Like, I mean, so we are constantly evaluating that, because that also bodes into what cases we're going to bring into the firm, and how are we handling vacations, maternity leaves, all the things. Like, capacity is one of our, I mean, it's one of the things we stay closely attuned to.
I love that you're talking about using sort of semi-subjective, but really subjective
Yeah.
data, having a feedback loop with a team member ranking themselves 1 to 5. I think I want to highlight that point for everyone listening, because that's an area where I know a lot of folks struggle in terms of, how do I check in with the team? How do I monitor things that I don't know how to put a data point on just
Right.
yet? And that's a great way to do it. Having some type of, whether it's 1 to 5, 1 to 10, I don't know, 1 to 100, however you want to score it, right? Getting that feedback loop with your team. Now, I have to ask about the phrase that you used earlier of pick your own salary. What does that look like? What does it mean? And how does it work?
Sure. Well, when we are interviewing people, we have like a chart that says, if you want to bill 800 hours a year, this is how much we would pay you. If you want to bill this many
Mm,
hours a year, this is how much we would pay you. Do you know what I mean? And so
yep.
people come in and decide. And I mean, obviously, some people come in and they pick a number that's not on our chart. And so then we've got to like figure that out. But I mean, we start with, what do you think it is you want to do? Like, how many hours do you want to put into work? Because obviously, billable hours aren't 1 to 1 for time. So we have to look at their experience level, because obviously a lower experienced attorney is going to take longer to get a billable hour onto an invoice at
Yep.
their normal hourly rate. And that's another thing we have, I mean, become kind of crazy. We have nailed down this idea of billed on invoice. I mean, I should probably trademark it or something, but it's this whole
You and I
thing.
both know someone who'd be glad to help out with that
Yeah.
trademark. Hey, Joey, good to hope you're listening.
But it's this whole thing around teaching attorneys that your billable hours are actually hours that are going on an invoice at your normal hourly rate. That is a billable hour. And
Right.
so when, I've had for years, I would have people be like, oh, yes, I'm meeting my billable hours. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, you're discounting, these, or you're doing, I'm like that, and I worked with the CFO one time, and he was just like, Elise, you need to give them a definition. I was like, I will. A definition of a billable hour is an hour that goes on an invoice at your normal hourly rate. Because
Mm,
a lot of attorneys want to talk about collections, and
right.
collections are not solely in that attorney's control, because sometimes the firm might do something. Sometimes we do need to discount for whatever reason.
Sure.
Maybe we've made a mistake somewhere. There's a million things that an owner or leadership of a firm could impact collections. I mean, the firm could just have bad billing practices, like where,
Absolutely.
so there's all kinds of things. So I very much want all the things that my people are held to be
Mm,
100% within their control all the time.
I love that. I love that that's been a through line through this whole discussion, too. That's fantastic. So, Lise, before I ask you the last little 3-part question here, if people are interested in connecting with you, learning more about what you do, having you in their network, or hoping that they can join yours, where should we send them?
Um, I mean, they should probably just email me. They could email me at elisebuiefamilylaw.com. And maybe you could just like put that in your show notes or something.
Absolutely. We'll put it in the show notes, so take a look below. And I'll recommend connect with Elise on social media platforms as well. She shares a lot of these insights in many different platforms, so worth connecting with her for sure. So, Elise, last little 3-part question here. It's, what are you reading, watching, and listening to these days?
That's so funny because it's all the same right now.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm excited for this answer. Perfect.
Oh my gosh. I should definitely get like some kind of marketing kickback. But it would be Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. I have read that book like 3 times, but I am currently listening to it on Audible. I've been going through so many of his YouTube things around like how, he does a lot of programming and offers, real practical like templates and solutions, in using an EA or various things. I
Mm.
recently have brought on a new EA into my world, well, two. And so that has spurred me on to think more about all this. And then also you mentioned how we bought this house in New Orleans, trying to figure out my time where for 6 months of the year I'll be in a central time zone. For 6 months of the year I'm in a Pacific time zone for the most part. And but also working with my own energy and my own like how do I wake up and operate best, and when do I work best when I'm consulting with other law firm owners versus running my law firm, maybe doing one-on-ones with my own leadership team. So I've been like really into this. So I mean, I am like all over Buy Back Your Time. I mean, and I am listening, reading, watching. Like, I
I
think
love
I've
it.
spent like 5 hours a day for the last like 10 days.
Well, look, first off, you get to be the first person who's ever united that trio of questions. So
Oh,
congratulations, first
I
ever
love
on that front. We'll pin a little medal on right there. That's great. And second off, I love that you're into Buy Back Your Time. It's one of the books that, so my friend Dave Fries first recommended it to me, and as soon as I read it, it was, oh my gosh, this is canonical. Like there are certain business books that we all sort of hold in the not
yes.
just worth reading, but rereading, implementing,
Oh, yeah.
revisiting time and time again. That's one of them for me. Like it's that, Atomic
100.
Habits, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It
Right.
just reached canon status as soon as I read it.
Oh, it's been game changing to me and to so many people I'm working with. I mean, I'm talking to people and they're like, I don't think I have enough tasks for an EA. I'm like, girl, give me 10 minutes and I'll get you 200 tasks. I promise
Yeah.
you. Like,
It's all imagination. Like if you
oh,
really
yeah.
go through your day and
Oh,
start wondering, oh, could I just have that person do a first pass of research on that? That alone will save you
oh,
hours every day.
I mean, and that's why I wish we could talk about more things, because delegation is
I
the
know.
other thing that is not mentioned in law school. And talk about a skill set that is like, I mean, it just changes your world in
Yeah.
this way that is like, and I mean, I am a delegation just crazy person. I mean, crazy. I am like, I don't want to touch anything first, and I want people to get it like 70% of the way there. And that is like, I feel like it's just
Yep.
all golden.
Yep. Everyone should read Buy Back Your Time, and you shouldn't just read it, but every single time that you get to the end of a chapter, implement something that you just learned.
Oh,
Start anchoring it in your life rather than just knowing it. Big difference.
absolutely.
Well, Elise, I guess we're just going to have you back for an episode on delegation. That seems to be the only reasonable solution here. Also, when I had Mary Ellen O'Connor on earlier this year, we had talked a little bit about the intersection of motherhood and the law, and I want to put together a group of mothers to talk about that, so that way passing on some of the learned insight and wisdom onto
Right.
the next generation of rising female attorneys and law
I
firm
love that.
owners. So you're going to be on that list for sure. This is a voluntold rather than volunteer approach. At least, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your insight on everything leadership and law today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. And we will see you all in the next episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School.